I'm delighted to be here. I think we have a really excellent panel. I hope you'll get a chance to learn a lot. I like to keep things moving, so please, I'll introduce them, I'll let them present, but if you have any questions, please come to the microphone in the middle at any time and we can start and we can respond. I think the first thing I need to do is talk a little bit about why I thought this panel was important in the first place. I started noticing last year that after we had a court decision, a federal court decision, that the Ohio law about filing a complaint with the Ohio Election Commission about a false statement made in a campaign ad was ruled to be unconstitutional, we still had candidates from office filing complaints with the Elections Commission. And it seemed like they felt like they had no other alternative. Even though it was going to be thrown in the trash, or told it wasn't, there was this idea of outrage that my opponent could lie about me in an ad. And I simply seemed to have no recourse to do anything about it if I didn't have the same amount of money or time to advertise in opposition to them. So it was interesting to me to talk a little bit about, so what should happen next? And also, is this really a problem? Is it just a problem with a candidate, complaining that, it's simply somebody said something about me that I didn't like or was half true? And do we really need, a process to redress that, or just can the media handle it itself? And then became the idea of, what if it isn't really your opponent that is attacking you? It's a third party, an other group, a group that supports your opponent, maybe, and maybe not even tied to him, but likes an idea of theirs more than they like you, who is unleashing these ads about you, and you don't even know who they are, where they're from, what their money has come from. They just have a simple name, like Susan B. Anthony list, which to most of us isn't a household name. I don't remember seeing anything about Susan B. Anthony since the old quarter. So it became an interesting, I thought, topic for us to discuss, especially because it seems that journalists and lawyers have a whole new playing field to have to address in the light of there not really being a function that we've used for many years going to the Elections Commission to raise issues. Just briefly about the Susan B. Anthony case, it started in the 2010 general election. Congressman Driehaus from Cincinnati was running, and the Susan B. Anthony list is a pro-life organization, and they were beginning to run billboards in targeted congressional districts to point out that a vote for Obamacare was a vote for state-funded abortion. And that line had Driehaus, who I believe is Catholic, saying, I object to that, it's a lie, and I am going to file a complaint against the Elections Commission if you are to, against the billboard company, if this billboard company accepts Susan B. Anthony's billboard to put that in his district. Susan B. Anthony list took this to federal court and said, the problem is the Ohio Elections Commission has a false campaign speech statute that makes it a felony if you are found to be making a false statement. And their time and effort to defend themselves, even before they have even put up their billboard, is taxing on them. Well, there was merit found in that at the local level. At the 6th District Court of Appeals, they agreed, mostly in concept, because the actual issue was standing. Do they have a right to even file a lawsuit since they haven't done it yet? So nothing has actually happened. It wasn't like they filed it and it was taken down or even ruled that it was a false statement. There wasn't even a ruling. And the Supreme Court said they have standing to sue. They possibly have a case. So at that point, and we have the director of the commission here, said we are no longer accepting these complaints because this law seems to be suspended or unconstitutional, and we have had no one since. I thought that maybe it was a clever media tactic for a seasoned politician, one out of Akron, and so I was really intrigued that I have the Akron Beacon Journal editor here today, was filing a campaign complaint who should fully know that it wouldn't go anywhere, that they're not accepting them. But the idea that if I put something on paper and told the press, it would be like my best waving of my arms that I'm objecting and see if I can get some attention from the press that I have an issue with the ad. So here we are left in this kind of interesting world. This is an interesting campaign cycle because, at least as I was talking, on the presidential level, it doesn't seem attack ads are as meaningful in Ohio today as at any time, because the actual news of what's going on in this campaign is so much more bizarre than I think anybody would ever craft for an ad. And Bob could tell us a little bit more about whether he would do something or just listen. I heard him on NPR earlier this week, and he had fun talking about what a interesting time. So with that said, that's our opening. I want to get to give you a little national perspective on dark money, if you have heard about it or not, what it is, and how it's prevalent. I think that probably you'll see in Ohio, and Sheila will probably touch about it, the biggest amount of it in Ohio in this cycle has been in the Senate race, where there's been a tremendous amount of money, as you've seen, spent by outside groups about Senator Portman and about former Governor Strickland that neither campaign has produced. But it has been going on since January, as far as I can recall, maybe even earlier. So with that, let me introduce you to Sheila Krumholz, who's going to give us a little bit more about what dark money is and how it's playing a role.
Thank you, Dan. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I have a PowerPoint that should be here. Get that going. Thanks to the Ohio State Bar Association and for you for your interest. I'm glad to be able to set the table with some numbers. I'm not a lawyer. We are not an election law organization. We crunch the data on campaign contributions, lobbying, personal financial disclosures, money in politics at the federal level. First, a note on CRP, Center for Responsive Politics, and our website, opensecrets.org. We're a nonpartisan research organization. We are not a campaign finance reform organization. We take no position on Citizens United, for instance. CRP aims to be a credible and accurate resource for journalists and others trying to get their hands around money in politics issues. We do advocate for some things, transparency first and foremost, which is to say both effective and meaningful disclosure. More on that in a moment. We also support political accountability and transparency. That transparency makes possible, and the notion that if we're going to bother passing laws, we should bother to enforce them. In DC, disclosure has fallen into the chasm which has emerged between an FEC that can't agree on their mandate, a Congress that can't find common ground, and an IRS hamstrung by controversy, and a Congress that wants to impeach its commissioner. Meanwhile, millions of dollars from anonymous sources fund negative and often misleading political ads. 3 quick announcements on Open Secrets. Right now, if you go to our site, you may encounter a new site in 5 minutes. We're about to launch a new design. We hope it'll be more user-friendly and more responsive for mobile. We're also about to add hundreds of thousands of records on dark money organizations, specifically from our data collaboration with GuideStar in the coming weeks, so stay tuned for that. And finally, we have liberated more than 1 million records on political ad buys from the FCC and are digitizing them to make them searchable and downloadable, and are adding new user-friendly features, so please stay tuned for that. So with that backdrop, what do the numbers look like in 2016? Reported independent expenditures by nominally independent organizations have soared this cycle to $932 million, up from $554 million at this point in the 2012 election cycle, as you can see. Actually, including independent expenditures by party committees, we've crossed the $1 billion threshold. When looking just at spending by non-disclosing outside organizations or dark money groups, you can see here that as of last March, that too was taking off compared with previous cycles. These are primarily 501c4 and 501c6 nonprofits, but also include some super PACs which, though technically disclosing their donors, do not provide the original source of funds. So you can have meaningful disclosure, and that is not effective, not timely, not comprehensive, and you can have an effective disclosure process that's not meaningful. because it doesn't deliver what's important. What good is it to know that the name of the donor to a super PAC, what good is it to know the name of the donor to the super PAC when it's just the nonprofit affiliate acting as an intermediary? Meaningful disclosure means knowing the original source of the funds, not the last account it passed through, cleansing it of any identifying information. And what is the influence of dark money? Naturally, offering donors the option not to leave fingerprints helps with fundraising. More importantly, studies show that when people don't recognize the organization running an ad, they lean in. They don't question it. They don't necessarily bring a healthy skepticism to it. They lean in and listen closer. And those paying for and running the message don't have to worry that they're being exposed will undermine the credibility of their message. But then this happened. By May, the Koch brothers' vaunted money machine had dwindled from a pledge of $889 million to just $250 million, with a decision to virtually skip the presidential race. So at this point in the cycle, we're seeing big reductions in the rate of dark money spending overall, down from $187 million at this point in the 2012 cycle, dropping even below the last midterm election cycle to just $99 million, just $99 million so far. And that is just what's reported. So is dark money defunct? Can we stop worrying about it? This is difficult to see, but the bar shows you the portion in blue that's attributed to of outside spending attributed to the presidential race, the green to the Senate race, and then the gold to House races so far in this cycle. For those concerned about mega donors and corporations funding secretive groups and pass-through intermediaries, the decreased reliance on dark money groups is a positive sign. Still, this money is highly targeted at the most competitive races in the nation, where a pretty small number of votes can make the difference between winning and losing, including, of course, the Ohio Senate race, which currently ranks third in most reported dark money spending after the presidential race and Pennsylvania Senate race. So 15% of the unreported, of the reported spending in the race is from unknown sources, not included all of that unreported spending, like the millions spent here by One Nation, on, which is a political nonprofit related to Karl Rove, on ads run outside of the reporting windows. As of mid-February in 2016, only 65 of nearly 5,000 ads that had run in Ohio in the Ohio Senate contest were paid for by an organization that disclosed its donors. 65 of 5,000. Oh, sorry, and I think I ran ahead here. As this chart shows, more dark money ads were run in Senate races by early 2016 than were run in all races at the same point in 2012. And then quickly, in the Ohio Senate race, outside groups have spent almost 4 times as much on behalf of Portman as he has spent himself. In fact, they've already spent $13 million more than he has raised based on his last report. And of course, the tally changes tomorrow, so my numbers will be out of date in 24 hours. When we'll also get a chance to look at the quarterly filing super PAC's latest spending, so stay tuned for that. So finally, if you're interested in keeping abreast of the money, just go to opensecrets.org. You can hit the sign up button to get our weekly newsletter, and feel free to contact me or info@crp.org if you want custom data or have questions. I'll also give you the name of our excellent dark money researcher, expert, Robert McGuire. He is at rmaguire, M-A-G-U-I-R-E, at crp.org. So thank you, and I hope those figures were helpful to set the table.
Thank you, Sheila. It is. I mean, just to get a perspective, you are seeing a lot of ads. I think one of the things that surprised me, and I'll ask Doug to kind of talk about this little, is the fact that Sheila mentioned that people lean in. They've stopped caring, or they're not even really assessing too much of who's developing this ad. It has more credibility simply, even if you've never heard of this group. Doug, what are you doing? You have kind of launched a kind of a cooperative among the other major newspapers to kind of take a look at this on the ground in Ohio. Tell us a little bit more about the work that's going on to try to help readers or the public make sense of what we're seeing.
Yeah, I want to build a little bit on where Sheila stopped, and that is that the dark money is playing a significant role in news media coverage, well, in our ability to cover the elections. We did a story that was a cooperative of several news organizations that I think the headline was something along the lines of "Knock, knock, we know what car is in your garage." And we followed a group that was campaigning for Senator Portman. It was two young people with a cell phone, and they had information loaded on their device, and they were working through a neighborhood, in a suburban neighborhood between Akron and Canton, and the device would tell them which houses to stop at, what kind of conversation you should have, and everything you need to know about that family. Skip this house, go to this one. And what's interesting is that the software that was developed for that is software that is associated with the Koch brothers and their organizations. And they are gathering information, that detail, about all the people in this country. And it is a dark money organization that then uses that information to go out and campaign, create ads, target ads. So what's happening is, well, on the Democrat side, the party is doing the same thing. So you need to keep in mind, both are doing that. And they are doing this in such a way that they do not want the media involved at all. They don't want to have press conferences. They don't want to have interviews. They know exactly which door to knock on to deliver the message they wanted to deliver to change the vote in that house. Who needs the media? So as we're watching this happen, we're struggling with, so what are we going to do? We've got another crisis of our own, and that is a business model that doesn't work. Our readership at the Beacon Journal is as high as it was in the early 1980s. The problem is half of the people who read us want us to give it to them for free online, not just in a one-day cycle, but 24 hours a day with audio and video. So they want more and don't want to pay for it. And meanwhile, all advertisers are going to direct marketing. So they've left these news organizations. We've got an economic crisis, and we've also got this crisis of how are we going to deliver news about politics, for example, when the politicians are not cooperating. So we had a kind of a, what you might call, come to Jesus moment last fall, when we gathered. National Institute for Civil Discourse recognizes this disconnect that media has, and we had a session in Columbus last fall, and they put journalists in one room, elected officials in another, and citizens in another, and they asked us to fill up sheets of paper describing each group. And for journalists, we said, oh, we're overworked, woe is us. We put all these adjectives on the wall. For elected officials, we put power hungry, out to get money, disconnected, aloof. We put those on a sheet of paper. For citizens, we put apathetic, not paying attention, lazy. We put those on sheets. We didn't know that we were going to have to all go back together and put our sheets up on the wall for everyone to see. And the citizens saw this sheet and they said, whoa, this is what you think of us? And we had a moment where we said, you know, we got to deal with this. So news organizations came together this year in Ohio to do something that is different, we hope, and starts a change in the way we cover politics and deals with dark money. We said we need to be advocates for the people of this state. First of all, we need to do polling that's unique to find out what is on the minds of the people of this state and how do we represent them as journalists. And we got a Knight Foundation grant of $175,000. The University of Akron is doing 3 waves of polling, and the very first question is, we're not giving them a list of things that are important and you pick which one's important to you. We said, what's the most important issue to you? We didn't give them any introduction, just what's important to you? And we started with open-ended questions. And my gosh, there are 11 million different problems in Ohio. How do journalists make sense of that? Well, that told us something about the people of Ohio that we needed to know. There's 11 million different stories behind everybody. And we need to somehow represent them in this process. And we also did citizen deliberations in which we brought groups of people in to say, okay, now, we're getting a sense of what's important to you. How do you want us to deliver this information to you so you are informed voters? How do we be advocates for you in this process? And we're using that as a roadmap to deliver news differently this year. It is very difficult. It's difficult managing your own newsroom. We're trying to manage newsrooms all over the state to do something collectively. What is wonderful is, just a few weeks ago, we did a package on immigration that M.L. Schultze was the key reporter on from WKSU, and we did graphics, and we did interviews with lots of people, the political positions of the candidates. In our deliberative session with citizens, we gave them a wire piece, a piece that was done by one news organization in the state not cooperating with us, and our package. And they read all three, and they said, this is exactly what we want. We want you to give us a package like Schultze did, and deliver this on the web, in your newspapers, on public radio. This is just beautiful. Give us the facts. Give us the opinions. Let us make the decisions. So we think we are finding something that allows us to represent the people, to deliver the positions of the candidates, to give them a bunch of facts from which they can draw their own conclusions and make informed decisions. And in that way, we give the people something they feel they need, and it is not controlled by the message of the candidates. One last thing. When we unveiled this at the ONA convention back in February, that we're going to try to do this, there was one editor in the room who said, wait a minute, it's our job just to cover the candidates. They do their own polling. They know what's important. We should cover that because it's our job. We're not supposed to be advocates for the people. We're just supposed to cover what's going on. We have taken the position in this collaborative, that's not what journalism is about. Journalism is somehow representing the 11 million people in Ohio, their interests, their concerns, and holding politicians accountable. We're not all in agreement, but we're forging ahead. So that's our answer to big money.
Great. Thank you, Doug. So let's talk a little from the other side. I have, if you've seen a TV ad about a candidate, in Ohio in the last 25, 30 years, Bob might have been part of it. And I just was informed, Ian James, who's his Democrat counterpart in this, just informed me he can't make it today. But so we have Bob's attention. Now, I will tell you this is going to be refreshing to you. I don't know if, I don't want to steal any of his thunder, but Bob was on the local radio station doing a thing, and he made this point that really struck me that I think will be surprising to you, but I think it's a good point of perspective from when you hear him. He said voters are not dumb, voters are smart. So with that point of view, Bob, do you want to talk a little bit about why us maybe in the media or lawyers are making too much fuss about this disclosure, non-disclosure, these ads, whether they're too far or not? Do you want to talk a little bit about from your side of how this has developed and worked?
Well, voters are smart, and a lot of people in my business don't think that. They think that voters are out there. They really don't want to know about what we're trying to put out there. It's a subject matter that normal people don't crave because elections are not that interesting. This year's though is, but normally they aren't that interesting, and so we think we have to force feed them. But voters really are smart. They get what's going on. I come from this from a different perspective in that. About 20 years ago, I was a staffer in the Ohio Senate, and I worked with then State Senator Bob Cupp to revamp the Elections Commission. And we created Mr. Richter's job in the process. And, you know, we saw what was there from the 70s and it wasn't working, and we really thought we could put something together that would work. It hasn't worked out quite the way we thought it would work, but
It worked really well for about 18 years.
yeah. But I mean, so I come at this as someone who early on thought that we got to have something in place here. At that time, I wasn't fully into doing media, political media, but I soon later did. You know, dark money is something that's there. It's legal. We're not, you know, let's not forget, we're not talking about anything that's illegal. I think it's great what the media is trying to do. Unfortunately for the media, the vast majority of people don't trust them. They're on about at the same level as politicians, which is pretty bad. So even if the media is out there trying to do their thing on this, by and large, most people are probably not putting a lot of credibility in it. People figure out this whole process. We've had a ton of negative negative advertising in this state, not only the U.S. Senate race, but also a ton on the presidential level. I don't know if this year it's going to be all that effective, and I'll tell you why. And I'm talking about the presidential level. I think it's different on the U.S. Senate level. But on the presidential level, we have two individuals running that are probably known by 99% of the population. And they have been out there publicly for the last 25 to 30 years. I think everything we think about these two individuals is pretty well baked in. You know, it's going to be tough for you to change your opinion on somebody that you've known that long. And that's why I think you've seen, while so much money has been spent in this state, you really don't see, you know, I mean, Hillary Clinton has outspent Donald Trump, what, 5, 6, 7 to 1 in this state. And up until 2 weeks ago, they were dead even, or he was a little ahead. And it just shows me that the effectiveness of this kind of campaigning, when you have certain situations like we have right now on the presidential level, it just doesn't work. Now, if you have people that nobody knows that's running statewide, and you have this kind of or you could even go back to 2012 in Ohio, presidential level. Romney was not that well known of an individual. That's why the Obama campaign went up in mid-May of 2012 with advertising, number one, and they stayed on until Election Day, continual. And the vast majority of their stuff early on was all about Mitt Romney and defining Mitt Romney, so that by the time Labor Day came, you know, people had an opinion of Mitt Romney in Ohio, and it wasn't very good because he wasn't that well known, and the first messaging they got was all pretty negative messaging. So in those kinds of situations, it does work. So that's why, you know, in a lot of campaigns, that's why a lot of the messaging is negative. We like to call it comparative in my business because we're comparing our opponent to our candidate. But it's out there. It's going to be out there. It's just a matter of, you know, people taking it all in, digesting it, and making their own decisions. And I do think people are smarter, and they make their own decisions based on their own, you know, knowledge base.
I have a real quick question
Sure.
for you. Just because a dark money campaign, a PAC, cannot coordinate with the candidate
No.
on the message,
Can't.
is it up to somebody like you to kind of help that party decide how to craft their message to make it relevant? It's like,
Sure.
this is going to be something. How does that work?
Well, what you try to do is you try to look at what your role is maybe in a campaign. And if you're a third-party entity, you go into it with the idea that you're probably going to have to do some of the negative messaging because the candidate themselves don't like to do it, and they don't want to be associated with it. So you walk into the door already kind of having what your role is going to be. And that's uncoordinated. I mean, that's just the way things are. So you go into this knowing kind of what your role is. So you attack it from that angle. So actually pretty easy to figure that out. It's not
Gotcha.
that difficult.
Monica, do you want to make a point there?
Bob may have a unique perspective on this, but what is the value of a false campaign ad?
Well, I've never, and I don't think anybody that I've known in this business ever goes in and says, okay, I'm going to do this ad, and it's not going to have anything true in it, or it's going to have this that's not really true. In politics, so much of this, and that's why the Elections Commission, I thought, once I saw it in place and functioning, I thought, they have a hard job, because it's all very subjective. It's never black and white. It's never like, okay, you said this, and that's absolutely wrong, and we have the proof, here it is, you got to take it out. It's never that way. It's always different perspectives, it's slight changes in wording, it's not something that's like obvious, like Donald Trump is really a woman, you know? It's never that clear cut. It's always something that, well, yeah, you could look at it that way, or yeah, you could look at it that way. It's never anything that's black and white like that. So that's why it's so tough to deal
So
with.
they're just misleading. Maybe not outright false, but they can be misleading. What's the value of a misleading ad?
Yeah, what you try to do is you try to tell the story from your perspective. That's what you're trying to do. You're not trying to mislead people. I mean, this is, you know, we go into this thinking, okay, this guy, this is a bad vote. Okay, he voted, you know, against the budget. Well, when you vote against the state budget, you vote against a lot of things that are good. Okay? Now, you may not think that's fair to say, well, he voted against increased funding for the Olentangy Local School District because that was contained in that budget. But he voted against it. Okay? So we're telling the truth. Now, you're going to say, well, but that's not, he really wasn't against that. Well, that's his job. You know, his job as the opponent is to talk about what he did. I'm not there to explain why he voted against it and how he really was for the funding. My job is to state what happened. And he voted against the budget, and when you vote against the budget, you vote against all these things that are contained in it. And it's fact, it's true, and that would pass the Elections Commission test.
Some of the most difficult cases that we ever had to deal with came out of a lot of budget votes where one side or the other, you know, picked out one particular issue out of the 500-page budget
Sure.
and said this was what they said and this is what they acted on.
So Phil, this is perfectly. Do we need an elections commission? Should we? You and I ran each other. I have thoughts. Do you have others? And in some form or fashion, it probably ought to be revised in light of this ruling. Any ideas of what is the value? What advice or what have been the thoughts of the commissions in light of this? What have you guys been doing, and what's on the minds of the commission about the future?
Well, we're actually still working, I will say that
Right.
much. It's a lot less exciting this time of year because we aren't dealing with any false statement cases. But the commission still has its campaign finance jurisdiction. We still have whether there are disclaimers properly put on materials. And so we still deal with those kinds of things. But no, we're not hustling to have meetings in 3 days to address those issues. Back to a couple of Bob's points where he said it's never black and white. That was always one of the admonitions from one of the early commission members was that, you know, almost nobody ever came to the commission and said, yeah, I said that on purpose and I did this. The only time that I can think of where it kind of inadvertently happened was when we were dealing with the Polaris Mall issue. And one of my commission members, there was a gentleman who essentially ran the campaign against the issue that was on the ballot down here in Hamilton County, or in Franklin County. And he walked him through a series of questions about whether they had received TIF funding. It was for the Jacobs organization. And this guy did a beautiful job of explaining all of the various TIF monies that they had gotten of the Jacobs organizations through the years, St. Louis and Memphis and Nashville, and how wonderful and helpful it was. And then he said to him, well, but up here you said it wasn't any good because the other side had gotten the TIF money. And he said, oh yeah, we knew that to be the case. And I think that's the only time in almost 20 years of doing this that somebody actually pretty much came out and said, yeah, we knew what we were doing, and we put it in there as a false statement. I've said to people, I'm not saying this because it's my job, but I really believe that there is a place for the Elections Commission. And unlike what has been presented about the commission in the courts, because they never saw the commission members actually work and actually struggle over the determinations that they had to make on what were often challenging issues. Some of them were really easy. Some of them you could get rid of quickly. Others, not so much. You commented that nobody had ever heard of Susan B. Anthony list. I hadn't either until then. Now I'm very familiar with the Susan B. Anthony list and what they represent and what they do. And so I've talked with some of the persons who would regularly appear before the commission, who I think have a great regard and respect for the First Amendment and First Amendment free speech rights, and discussed with them, could there be a role for the commission out there? And their general consensus was yes. I'm sure there are those out there that would certainly say no. I understand that. But I look at it as potentially having the commission act as a forum is what I am suggesting, I guess is one of a better phrase, for the parties to come together and allow themselves to have that forum to share more information, to argue their case, not necessarily that the commission would be there to say, okay, this is false or that's true. That would be the challenging aspect of what would the commission's role be after it assesses the matter, but to allow them that additional opportunity for more speech, which is what everybody would always talk about in the court decisions and in various other venues, is that the remedy for speech is more speech. Well, if you can use the commission as a place to bring the respective candidates together, it allows that more speech so that more information is out there for the voters, because it may sound trite, but the commission did look at itself, similar to what Doug was talking about, as being that organization that was there for the voters, to try and make sure that the voters were getting good information in any particular situation. So that's the suggestion, I guess, that I have. I'd like to think it's certainly possible. By the way, I did have to say one thing.
Yeah.
When you mentioned, and I'm not trying to bring you down in any way, you talked about the complaints still being filed with us and being thrown in the trash. No, they were respectfully returned.
Okay.
I have you know. And so I just wanted to make that clear.
Exactly.
That they were handled properly.
Let's. I want you to make one distinction of the law that this struck me, and then I'll get to your question, because Monica brought this up, the difference between misleading and false. So our law had a level of what was false that I think most reporters would understand. It is akin to actual malice, right? Isn't that the level?
That was the level.
Right.
Yes.
We put that in for a reason.
Right.
Why did you put that in for a reason, Bob?
Well, because
to be
we
there.
wanted to get it to a level that was intentional. We wanted to look at intent. What was the intent of putting something in there that was false?
Right.
So a politician would have to cross the same line as a reporter.
Yes.
Right, in order to be
Yes.
held liable.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, and if you look at, if you go back to the Supreme Court decisions that established,
Right.
the parameters around this, they were all established on, malice, the actual malice standard,
Right.
and intentional falsity, and not merely the fact that something was misleading.
Right, and it wasn't like they particularly did not like something, and I've seen some of our advocates against the law say, because you would say he's wearing a blue shirt, or that he didn't show up on 19 days when it was 20 days. Stuff like that.
Well,
that was all not
yeah.
going to reach the level to be a finding.
And Senator Cupp, being an attorney,
Yeah.
wanted to make sure that we took it to that level that was
Right.
criminal,
Right.
basically, a criminal level.
Right. That's it. Question real quick, and then we'll get to Monica.
Thank you.
Yep.
Does everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
All right. I guess the question is going to come from a couple of things that was just mentioned. But we've talked about more speech being a good thing, or trying to solve the ills of democracy with more democracy. And it seems to be inherently unequal in the speech that is made. And so this is coming back to this notion of dark money, and if there could be a better definition given, I think that would help clear some things up. From what I was hearing, it seemed to be legalized money laundering, and that means that there's some level of tracking it, and there's some level of disclosure. And so what needs to, I think, be clearer for perhaps the public, for political scientists like myself, and students that I teach, when we say dark money, are we saying it's not disclosed, or that there is some curtain? What can't we know, and why can't we know it?
Sheila, you want to grab it?
So different people may bring different definitions to dark money. We refer to it as the money being spent. I think generally people accept that the definition is money being spent on political activities by politically active nonprofits, usually 501c4 social welfare organizations, not 501c3 charitable or educational organizations typically. So C4 or C6 business leagues, like the Koch brothers Freedom Partners Chamber of Commerce, so or the Chamber of Commerce. It is legal for them to spend that money, and there are nonprofits that have a long history of both serving a social welfare purpose and conducting political activities, like the NRA, like Planned Parenthood. When they run ads, people don't lean in because they have an opinion about those organizations. They're well known, and they do have, whatever you think of them, they do have a social welfare purpose. The political activity, although it is significant, is secondary. However, what a recent study that we conducted with the Wesleyan Media Project shows is that since Citizens United, the majority of organizations that have establish, run political activity, and disappear, or reinvent themselves as another organization. So it's a new breed of organization that has taken advantage of the law, the rules, to be arguably significantly, if not primarily, dedicated to political activity. And that may not only be running political advertising, but it is different and apart from the tens, hundreds of thousands of organizations that have conducted these activities for years. There is an element, a concern about money laundering by tax experts, particularly because, as we've documented, there is a huge amount of churn going on between connected organizations, affiliates, networks, and again, using organizations and various elements of tax-exempt law that allow them to kind of morph and change formation and merge and acquire organizations. So, for instance, Crossroads GPS, when it appeared that they might be in difficulty, commandeered One Nation, and now they're operating through One Nation. Disregarded entities allow organizations to operate through various affiliates. The point is, it's concerning because as they use these organizations to pass money through organizations which ostensibly have a social welfare purpose, but have no employees, have no bricks and mortar, have tens of millions of dollars, and do not do anything but push money on, there is, I think, a strong case to be made that they are not operating as tax-exempt law dictates they should.
Monica, you want to pop up here and do you want to show your ad? You want to talk about real quick and then talk a little bit. Monica represents TV stations who the thing about these ads, and we talked about, is unlike the candidates' ads, they're not obligated to accept them, but they do. And when they do, they make some decisions about the propriety of it, but mostly they're looking for just a broader parameters, not really judging the ad themselves.
Right, so just let me give you a little bit of a framework as far as where TV stations come at this whole topic of political ads. You and I see campaign ads all the time that we think, wow, how did that ever hit the air? This is just a terrible ad, whatever. Well, it's just a fact. FCC law, federal law is that TV stations, radio stations, if you're a licensed broadcaster, you have to carry candidate ads, whether it's a federal, state, or local campaign, you have to carry that ad. So there's not much a TV station or a radio station can do about an ad. But the third-party ads, well, in exchange, let me back up. In exchange for the requirement that a TV station has to carry a candidate ad, there will be no liability to that TV station for anything false in that ad. Nobody can sue the TV station for defamation, copyright infringement if music is used without permission. TV station's off the hook for that. But if it's a third-party ad, the FCC rules don't apply to that. TV station can decide to take the ad or not take the ad, and the TV station will be on the hook for copyright infringement, defamation, invasion of privacy, whatever claims might be brought with that ad. So as a result, TV stations are more careful about the third-party ads that they run. Sometimes they turn them down. More often than not, they accept them. I mean, it is money that you're turning down. So what usually happens is that you air an ad. If the TV station thought something in that ad was suspect, they will ask the advertiser, the campaign, the third-party, group, to provide substantiation. And this happens all the time. The substantiation is usually a painstaking process at times. The TV station will ask for documents. You're making this allegation. Give me the documents that back up that allegation. And as the panel has discussed, the standard is actual malice. If the ad has something in it that the TV station knew was false or acted with reckless disregard in publishing, then the ad probably should have been pulled. The TV station could be on the hook. So how does this play out? My clients really have a pretty liberal view towards what we'll get on the air, what third-party ads will get on the air. Because you have to remember, this is political speech, and the case law is solid and long-standing that political speech is core protected First Amendment speech. So if there's a grain of truth to it, or if the ad is substantially true, it's going to run. Some ads, though, end up being pulled from the air if the TV station receives a complaint and the ad can't be substantiated. It will get pulled. And here's an example that, how do I get this up?
I think
It's not up.
do we just press the play button, or will that
Let me
main
set it
screen
up.
just come back up? Why don't you say what
Okay,
you
let
got?
me
You
just
got
set it
two
up a
ads
little
running
bit.
back to back.
So this was an ad, I think back in 2011, the Issue 2 campaign, which was the collective bargaining issue that was on the ballot in Ohio. That was the Issue 2 would have restricted the collective bargaining rights of state employees. There were lots of protests about it. This is probably ringing some bells, I hope. There was a pro-labor ad, which was against Issue 2. The ad was aired by We Are Ohio. Don't press yet. The ad was sponsored by We Are Ohio, a third-party group. And in that ad, this grandmother appeared, very sympathetic character, and she was saying vote no to Issue 2 because she had a pro-labor, labor background, and she thought it would hurt firefighters. So the original ad had the grandmother saying vote no on Issue 2. The pro-Issue 2 group, Building a Better Ohio, ran their competing ad, which used the same footage of the grandmother, except without her saying vote no on Issue 2. So you have an ad now that says vote yes on Issue 2, showing the face and this grandmother talking about Issue 2, but they cut out the important stuff, which was this grandmother is against Issue 2, and now she's in an ad saying vote yes on Issue 2. The grandmother understandably was upset by this and complained. She and the various third-party groups complained to the TV stations. So this is the first ad. This is the ad, the vote no on Issue 2 ad.
It's not popping up on the screen.
Oh, shoot.
I don't know, maybe if you hit it.
If not for the firefighters, we wouldn't have our Zoe today.
All right. Well, we're running.
Sound.
Well, we're running out of time, so I don't want to. So anyway, so the grandmother talks to the media and says, wow, they made me look like an idiot. My point is vote no on Issue 2. Now it looks like I'm voting yes on Issue 2. The stations maybe could have faced a defamation suit or false light, invasion of privacy. They would have had to argue that, look, it was substantially true. You were in an ad, and they didn't say you said vote vote yes on issue 2. But 30 stations in Ohio pulled this ad. My stations didn't. So I didn't provide any advice on this one. But a lot of stations pulled it because it made this grandmother look so bad, and why it just seemed wrong. But a lot of stations didn't pull it because they felt like this would be interfering in political discourse about a hot topic issue on the ballot. So they decided not to pull it. Did the grandmother sue? No. It is very hard to win one of these lawsuits, just as it's very hard to win a defamation suit. So I think with that, I'll stop.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, again, as it usually happens to me, my ambition outstretched our capacity. We've run out of time.